All right, ready or not, we are live today, and this is Seth Cherapak, and I'm here today to talk about whether writing and publishing a book is going to make you an authority. You hear this all the time. It's people have been saying it for decades, and I have been a ghostwriter for decades. I've written hundreds of self-help books and books with helping authors to experts to become authors, and I have a few of my ghostwritten books on the New York Times bestseller list. And so I know a little bit about this. I've also been endorsed by two of the industry leaders in my industry for the books that I've written, the frameworks I've created. And the big question today is, will writing a book make me an authority? Now, there's probably three types of people who are watching this. There's people who are already experts in their field and haven't written a book yet, but are thinking about whether they should spend their time and energy doing it. Or maybe you're in the process of writing one, you're kind of stuck with a lot of notes and they haven't really been structured into an organized flow that actually can be read from start to finish by your audience that you feel confident in putting your name on. Or maybe you have already written a book and it didn't have the impact that you wanted it to. Maybe it got you clients or maybe it didn't get you clients, but there's three different outcomes you can get if you write a book. Number one, you can get a book that just nobody ever contacts you about it. You know that people are reading it, but you never hear from them. I'm going to talk about why that is in just a second. But the second outcome is where you have people contacting you about your book. They seem really excited about it. They're almost like they're your buddy. They're contacting you on wanting to connect on social media, wanting to tell you all about like their experience writing the book or their experience with the topic itself. And then you have a third type of person who may be hiring you, but they are not paying you the fees that you really feel like your expertise deserves, which can be the most frustrating because it's like if you know you're an expert and you know there's other people out there who are not nearly as smart or as experienced as you are who are getting these tremendous results, they're commanding these really high fees, and it's because they have a book or maybe they have a podcast, but you're not quite getting the impact that you want to get. There's actually one reason why this happens. And if you haven't written a book yet, this is absolutely something you need to hear before you finish and publish your book, is what I'm going to share in today's live. So the question is, can writing a book make you an authority? Now, when I say authority, I mean you're an expert who sells an idea or who sells a service or who sells a product, and the main product is you as the expert, right? It's they're buying your expertise, not just your knowledge, but the way that you approach solving problems for them. That's what it means to be an expert, right? And you have to be able to do this in a way to where the person cannot go to AI instead of you to get the problem solved. And believe it or not, AI cannot solve problems as well as a human being can when it comes to certain categories of problems. And so if you're thinking, is AI going to nullify my expertise? Are expert businesses still going to make sense? Does it even make sense for me to position myself as an expert? Is it even worth writing a book now that a lot of people out there are using AI to write? I want to tell you that not only is it still important to write a book, it's even more important today than it was before AI. And I'm going to tell you why in this video. But first, let's talk about what's really going on because a lot of people will say, well, writing a book will make you appear as an expert. And that is absolutely not true. I know a lot of people who write books who just don't get the traction that they want, even if they get a lot of readers, even if they get a lot of fans, even if they get a lot of applause. There is a categorical black and white difference between being an author and being an authority. And it all comes down to one thing that you either do or not do when you write your book that makes all the difference. And again, I have ghost written and ghost edited and published I done published hundreds of self-help books over the past 20 years. And I have seen what authority status through writing and publishing a book can do for you if you do it right. But there's one thing that you got to know how to do, and that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. But first, let's talk about why it's important to have a book in the first place. First of all, a book can sell for you even when you're not there to make the sale. This is huge because if you have your own business, whether you're a coach, a consultant, some other type of expert where people are coming to you not only for the service you provide and the grunt work you do, but for your expertise, people can come to you treating you as a commodity and basically shopping you against the other quote unquote cheaper people who offer quote the same thing. And that's a very frustrating place to be because people don't see you as unique authority. They think, well, I can get the same thing from somebody else. Or they can come to you with no price resistance, no ideological resistance, which we'll talk about in a second. And they can come to you because you have a coherent message that is the same across all your communication channels because you have a central framework around which all your content revolves. But think about this for a second. If you own a business, you're probably spending a lot of time selling, recruiting, contacting people, networking. You're stuck inside that warm network where, in order for you to get new clients, to make sales, you have to go out there and do hands on work to connect with the people, to do book calls. Selling probably eats up a lot of your time and your energy as a business owner. Now, if you're on here and you own a business, just put a percentage in here of how much time you actually spend going out there and finding and closing new clients. If you're on the live chat, I can only see Instagram right now, but if you're on the live chat, how much of your time are you spending going out there and finding clients yourself, cold calling, connecting with people, doing webinars, whatever it is? That chews up a lot of your time and your energy. Imagine if instead of having to do that, you had a salesperson, that's your book, that was out there recruiting people for you so that you're sitting there one day and you get a DM in social media or you get an email from someone you've never heard of before, and they want to talk to you about hiring you at your premium rates. And they tell you, I've been reading your book. I read your book a couple times. I read it 2 years ago. I heard about you 3 years ago. Again, you haven't heard of this person, but they come to you with no price resistance and they come to you with no ideological resistance, which we'll talk about in a second, which is very important. This is where being an expert actually gives you leverage. It starts to make sense because now instead of you having to go out there like a hunter gatherer and find clients, you've got a book that's recruiting clients for you. They're coming to you and they have no price resistance and they are more sold on your framework. And it's just a lay down. It's easier to get the person to say yes because they're already sold without you having to be present. This frees up your time and your energy to focus on the things like product creation, delivering your service, all the things that you know you should be doing to build your business. But a lot of your time and energy is being just zapped up going out there and finding clients. Just think about that. A no commission salesperson, that's what your book is. It goes out there and recruits clients for you, brings them to you with no price resistance, and they're just a lay down. Now, here's why that's important. If you're approaching other people, maybe it's by cold ads, maybe it's by email, maybe it's by networking. They have a completely different perception of your value than if they come to you through a book, right? It's called attraction marketing. If a person comes to you because they've read your book, they've really been moved by it, they see you as an expert, you've changed the way they think about the problem that you're helping them solve, that's totally different than you coming to them. Think about all the people who come into your DM, your email, and are cold reaching out to you. You've never heard of them before. Don't you have a lower perception of that person's value? Because if they're really good at what they do, why do they have to go out there and hunt for work? So there's a twofold benefit here when you have a book that's written the right way. We'll talk about that in a little bit. That not only do you have someone else selling on your behalf and it frees up a lot of your time and your energy, and it also saves you from a lot of the negativity involved with selling, overcoming objections, hearing people say no, hearing people price shop you against competitors. That wears on your psyche, on your emotions, on your confidence after a while. All that goes away when you have a tool that's out there selling for you. And not only that, if people find you, they're attracted to you through a book that you wrote. They will come to you and see you as kind of the guru on the mountain that they ascended the mountain to get to instead of you going out and hunting for them. So that's the first benefit of it. Now, your book has to be written the right way. If you're listening to this and you've written a book and you say, well, that doesn't happen, Seth, my book's not doing that, I'm going to tell you why in this live broadcast. But let's talk about the second benefit. And the second benefit is there's almost no price resistance. Think about how much you're charging per hour or per project for whatever you're doing right now. I'd be willing to bet that unless people really see you as an authority, they're not paying you anywhere near what your service is really worth. And this is really frustrating because you spend all this time finding a client, and then by the time you find them, it's barely enough to cover your expenses, and you don't have anything else to invest back into your business. And you're spending a lot of time fulfilling the service. So now you're trapped doing all the hands-on work, and you're just stuck in what I call entrepreneurial purgatory, where you can't grow past a certain amount because every time you find a new client, you're not getting paid enough. You have to do the work. It's hard to delegate it out. Imagine people coming to you and being willing to pay you literally 10 times as much as you're making right now. And I've seen this happen because they don't have price resistance, because they've been through your book, they understand your authority, your expertise, they see you as being one of a kind, right? They're not listening to you and thinking, oh, well, I'm going to talk to this person, but I'm also going to compare them price wise to competitors and see if there's somebody else who offers the same thing for a different price, because they're so familiar with you and with your framework and the way that you see the problem. They know there's nobody else out there like you. Now, I'm going to talk about how to write a book that actually positions you that way in a minute, but just imagine that instead of the person haggling price, comparing you to other people who aren't nearly as good and nearly as experienced as you are, they just come to you and they say, well, go ahead and send the invoice, and boom, they pay it. The higher drama clients, the one that cause you a lot of problems, are always the cheaper clients. It's the craziest thing. People who are willing to pay you what you really worth, they will respect your time. They're not going to make a lot of unreasonable demands and add stuff on top of the project that wasn't part of the package in the first place. They're going to pay their invoices quicker. They're not going to haggle with you over price. They're going to be less likely to leave you for somebody else. So you're attracting a completely different quality of client. But not only that, this may be the same person who would have shopped you on price if they hadn't read your book first. So it brings down all that price resistance because it positions you as someone who offers them something that they cannot get somewhere else. That's the second thing. Just imagine what that would be like for a minute. Now, the third thing is what I call ideological resistance. And this is going to sound weird to some of you, but if you're an expert in what you do, you have a unique approach to solving a problem or to getting an outcome, right? You have a unique process that you use, something that has been very, very effective. Maybe you refined it through decades of working with people and it works really well. The problem is, when a person hires you, they start having opinions about the way that you do it. And then they want to change this and change that and do this different. They don't follow these instructions because their own assumptions about how to solve the problem are getting in the way of them trusting your expertise, trusting your framework. I cannot tell you how many times I see this as a marketing consultant, where the people who follow my framework to the letter get tremendous results very quickly. It's almost head spinning how quickly they get results. The only difference between people who actually get the results I promise and the people who don't are that they follow the system. And when you write a book, if a person has read your entire book, they're familiar with your framework, your unique approach to solving the problem, they're sold on it. That's why they're contacting you, because they read the book and you explained your process in such a way to where it caused that dopamine release, right? They had that aha moment and they're like, this person has an approach to solving the problem that actually is going to work and nobody else has it. Now, it's really important that your book is written in such a way to where people understand this when they come to you. And we'll talk about why that is in a second. But that's the third thing. And this is the most important thing, because when you've written a book that demonstrates your expertise within a unique framework and approach to solving the problem, and the person's sold on that, they're going to come to you and they're going to trust your expertise. And probably 80 to 90% of them, you're always going to get some of those egomaniacs who still think they know the right way to do it, but they're going to be less resistant to following your process. And because of that, if you're really good at what you do, which I'm sure you are, they're going to get the results and you're going to have a lot more success stories and a lot more people who are excited and are going to bring you referrals. And it's going to have this multiplying effect. That's what I mean by ideological resistance. They're not going to trust their own way of doing things. They're going to trust your way of doing things. That's the third benefit. I hope some of you are all getting excited about this. You're probably thinking, well, how do I write a book that does this? We're going to get to that in a second, but it's important to understand these things first. And I'll tell you why when we get to the actual process of writing the book. The fourth thing is message coherence across multiple communication channels. You're probably marketing yourself on a few different places now, maybe Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, maybe your blog, maybe on paid ads, maybe if you're really smart, you're also advertising in print, especially if you have a local business, and you're showing up all over the place. But Did you know that if your messaging is not coherent across all those communication channels, people are going to get confused about who you serve, about the problem you solve, about what you really specialize in. And this is a mistake a lot of experts make because they're testing hooks. They're trying to figure out what's going to grab a person's attention. What catchy thing can I say to get more engagement on LinkedIn and get more engagement on Facebook and get more engagement on YouTube? And they're kind of experimenting with different audiences, different offers, different hooks. The problem with that, and I do encourage doing experimentation, but you got to do it smart. The problem with that is by the time a person gets to you, if they even do, they're not going to be clear whether it's for them, what problem you solve, how you solve it. And even if they do come to you, they're not going to be sold on your framework, your ideology, and your expertise because they still don't really understand what you do. And that's if they even contact you at all. I always tell people that the number one sin in marketing is confusion. This is the one thing I disagree with my mentor, Dan Kennedy, about. He thinks being boring is the number one sin. I think that it's important not to be boring, but a more common mistake is confusing people about who you serve, who you help, what problem you solve. And this is a huge problem with experts. They sound a different way on YouTube, a different way on LinkedIn, and they're basically trying to cater to the LinkedIn algorithm. They're trying to cater to the YouTube algorithm. They're so busy trying to cater to the algorithm and getting clicks and engagements and going quote viral that their message is completely inconsistent across all those channels and people are confused and not coming to them. Now, how does writing a book solve that? This segues into what I was talking about a moment ago. You see, your book has to be built around a unique framework that changes the way your reader thinks about the problem that you solve or the outcome you deliver. I'll say that again. Your book needs to be based on a framework that changes the way your prospect thinks about the problem you solve or about the outcome you offer. Now, just think about this for a second. Think about the best, most life changing books, business books or personal growth books that you've read in your life. I'm going to appeal to your intuition here instead of giving you stats because you're going to know this is true as soon as you ask yourself this question. Haven't those books changed the way you thought about the problem you were solving or the outcome you were trying to get? They cause you to read it and go, wow, I never thought about it that way before. And you could never look at the problem the same way. You could never look at the outcome the same way again. You've probably read 2 or 3 books like that in your life. A couple of mine were Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, his book, The Eighth Habit, The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey, Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins, The One Thing by, I think it's Gary Keller. I could list you probably half a dozen books that I've read that I saw that person as a unique authority who could solve the problem in a way that nobody else could because they changed the way that I thought about the problem or about the outcome. Okay, that's what your book needs to do. And you need to have a unique framework or unique ideology or step by step process or philosophy that your service is built around, right? Whether it's a product, whether it's a do-it-yourself course, whether it's a retreat where you take people through a transformation, whether it's the way that you set up and troubleshoot marketing funnels, marketing campaigns, the way you write books, you have a process or a framework that you use. And when you have one umbrella framework, one umbrella philosophy, whether it's a 4-step process, a 4-phase process, whether it's based on 4 pillars, whether it's like the 7 habits of highly effective people, when you start communicating in your videos, in your webinars, in your downloads, on your website, there's a unification, there's a cohesiveness to your message. Then they start thinking, oh, this is the 7 habits guy. Or if they're talking about me, oh, this is the 5-stage persuasion framework guy. My point is that when you write a book, if it's done right, if it's built around a framework, a philosophy that's unique to you, every time people see you on a place like YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, no matter where they find you, they're going to hear that framework, right? They're going to hear that cohesiveness in your messaging. And that's going to give them confidence. Okay, I know what this person is a specialist in. I know what their approach is. I know what problem they solve. Every time I see this person, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's reading their downloads, their books on Kindle, whatever it is, there's an organization, there's a cohesiveness, there's a unity to their message, and that builds people's confidence because it shows that you're not all over the place. You've actually committed to something that you've tested and proven throughout your years of expertise, and they have confidence that when they come to you, they're actually going to be taught something solid, something measurable, something they can hold you and themselves accountable to make sure that they're getting the result. So those are the four benefits of writing and publishing a book if you do it the right way. Number one, it sells when you're not present. That's huge. Number two, it brings down price resistance. Number three, it brings down ideological resistance so that they trust your expertise instead of like chasing a bunch of other theories and trying to apply a bunch of other people's stuff. And the fourth is that it makes your message consistent across all communication channels. That's the difference between a book that presents you as an authority and one that just makes you author of blank book. All these people who tell you that, author equals authority, that's not true. You can be the author of a book that nobody reads. You can be the author of a book that basically educates them about a topic but doesn't have a unique framework. Or you can write a book where you are presented as an authority, but you're not relatable. Okay, so let's talk about that, because by now I hope everyone's excited about the possibility of writing your own book and enjoying these four benefits. But this can absolutely backfire on you if you do it wrong. Okay. So let's talk about authority for a second. When you speak to someone, whether it's in your book, on your webinar, from stage, on your social media videos, no matter where it is, there's a posture and a quality that you speak to them with. There's actually four postures. My friend Eli Wild talks about this. This has also been something that some of the NLP people have talked about. But the first posture is what I call leadership. This is where you're the person in charge. You're the person telling them exactly what to do. You're the person who is presented as the do this, do that, don't do that authority, right? It's kind of like a bossy type of posture. But that's the way it's seen if you use it too much. And this is the first mistake people make when they write a book, is they present themselves as too much of the authority who's telling the person what to do. And it creates this natural resistance, this ego resistance that people have. People don't, especially if the person that you're serving is an entrepreneur or someone who is independent minded or kind of has a rebellious streak, which most entrepreneurs and business owners and forward thinking people do, which is a type of people you want to work with. They're going to have resistance to someone just coming along and telling them what to do, unless you make sure that you are not always in that authority leadership posture. In other words, you can overdo authority and sound like you're talking down to people, like you're condescending to them, like you're talking over their head. And they may see you as someone who really knows what they're talking about, but they're not going to come to you and hire you because they don't feel like you truly understand where they are and how to help them. And maybe they think you're going to be too rigid in the application of your framework or your system, and they're just not going to hire you. Or maybe they do hire you because it kind of makes sense what you're saying, but when they come to you, they don't fully understand how your framework works. They didn't fully comprehend everything that you said in the book. And so by the time they come to you and they ask for your help, since they don't understand your unique approach to things, you're constantly having to resell them on why you're doing what you're doing. And it's just this battle between them doing it the way you're advising and them doing it the way that either they think it should be done, or maybe this other guru or this expert that they've talked to, and they're reading a bunch of other books and going to a bunch of websites and coming to you with all these ideas about how this other person does it this way. And you're every single time you meet with a person, you're battling against these other so-called experts out there who are telling them, no, it's done this way. No, it's done that way. And the person's kind of bumping around between different frameworks because they see you as an authority, but you talked so over their head that they don't fully understand how your process works and how it relates to them. So you can overdo the leadership posture and you can alienate people. If you've ever spoken from stage or from a webinar, you felt this. People are out there, they're tuned in, they're listening, they're not saying anything, but they're not saying anything, right? They're not engaging, they're not responding. They don't feel like they're actually part of it. They feel like you're up here and they're down there. And by the end of it, maybe a few of them buy from you, but not very many. But you do have to present yourself in certain parts of your book as the leader, as the authority. Now, there's actually a right and a wrong way to do this. And this makes all the difference between whether people show up as someone who's ready to buy from you and believes that you're relatable and whether they don't. And the biggest mistake I see a lot of experts make is they come right out of the gate talking like an authority in the introduction or the first chapter of their book. And that is a mistake. And that is what a whole bunch of people tell you. The first thing you're going to do is present yourself as an authority. You know how they're going to see you if you do that? Someone who's talking down to them, someone who's trying to sell them something, somebody who doesn't understand their problem. You've ever heard the saying that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care? Well, that's actually not true. They don't care how much you know until they know that you understand them and can relate with their problems speaking their language. And that's the second posture. That's called empathy. It's the peer posture. This is when at some point in your book, you may say something to them like, if you're reading this book, you and I are probably a lot alike. And then you would make a list of all the things that you struggle with and be brutally vulnerable about the fact that you're human and you're not perfect. And you make sure that all the things that you confess that you struggle with are also things that they're struggling with now or have struggled with. And then you might pivot to the leadership posture and say, yet despite this, over the past 20 years, and then you start listing all of your achievements and accomplishments and endorsements. And now what you've done is you've gone into the leadership posture, but you've taken them by the hand. You've gone down into the hole that this person is in. You sat down next to him, you had a beer with them, a conversation with them, and said, hey, I can relate with you. Let's get up and get out of this together. And then they're going to follow and trust you as a leader. Why? Because they feel like they feel heard and they feel understood. People are not going to trust your authority and your leadership and your direction unless they believe that you understand them, where they are now, and the things they've struggled with. So that's two postures. There's leadership and there's empathy. Now, empathy can backfire on you. If you do this wrong, if you open up with too much empathy and too much of your book is this vulnerable, like, here's who I am, I'm only human, I'm your friend. If you do that, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get a lot of contacts from people who will talk to you like they've known you for years, like they're your buddy. They really like you, but like your buddy, they will never hire you because they think that your services should be free, or they kind of just see you as an equal. They don't see you as as a leader. And this is, again, a huge problem when people write a book where they're too much in the empathetic posture and they don't have a blend and a balance between the leadership posture and the empathy posture. Is they're very relatable. People like them. They got fans. People comment on their stuff. You ever get that person who comments on a bunch of your stuff, never buys from you, you know they have money, and the next thing you hear, they're hiring somebody else that does the same thing you do, and you're thinking, well, why doesn't this person ask for my help? It's the same reason your brother-in-law is not going to come to you for help, right? You're too familiar. You're too empathetic. You're too much of a peer and a buddy, and they don't see you as an authority. So are you starting to see those first four benefits that I talked about? Selling without you being present, price resistance, ideological resistance, message coherence, all those benefits of writing a book. You don't get those unless you actually balance out these four postures. There's two more we've got to talk about here. I hope for some of you, the light bulbs are starting to go off here, because you need to be relatable, but you also need to be a leader. Now, there's a third posture, because you also have to present yourself as a servant and a teacher. Now, yes, you can overdo this as well, but a servant and a teacher is where, instead of seeing eye to eye as equals, you actually kind of submit yourself to them. You humble yourself to them. Now, obviously, you can see what the problem would be if you overdo this, but the person also needs to feel some sense of confidence in themselves, that when they come to you, that you're not going to nullify all their experience, all their expertise, and just say, I'm the authority, I'm the expert, here's how it's going to be done, right? When you're working together with the person to solve the problem, they want to know that you're actually going to listen to them, that you're going to take their past experience into account, that you're not just going to come and say, do it this way, and I don't care about hearing what's failed for you in the past and what's worked for you in the past, right? That's a mistake. You've probably gone to experts like that before, maybe doctors who want to tell you exactly what to do, but they didn't bother to listen about what your past experience was, what worked and what didn't work, why you might be resistant to a certain idea or a way of doing things. The servant posture is like Jesus when he knelt down and washed the apostles' feet, right? He didn't stay there. He was an authority a lot of the time. And if you want to look at a good example, I mean, he's a good example of a historical figure who was a leader. He was very direct, very directive at times. He knew how to be a leader, but he also knew how to show empathy for people and service. The balance of those three different postures are what help people to say, yes, this is a person I can trust in to tell me what to do because I saw them as a leader. Yes, this person truly understands where I am now. Because listen, if you don't understand the person's problem, your authority could backfire on them. You could end up misdiagnosing the person's problem, applying something that's not quite going to work for them. It's not customized the way it needs to be. This is a really big problem with people who just have a framework and they're like, okay, we're going to do it this way, but I'm not going to bother to understand the nuances of your problem as it applies to your industry. They're probably going to crash and burn. I've seen a lot of people do this where they have a system or a framework that works for a whole bunch of clients, but then they get someone who comes along who has a nuanced situation and they can't adapt their framework to that person because they don't truly understand the person's unique situation or their problem. And people are afraid of that. If they're going to hire you as an expert, they need to know you understand where they are right now. That's why empathy is important. But service also means that, there's going to be times when you're educating them, you're taking on the role of an educator, you're going to be patient with them if they don't understand why something's not working, and that's where the servant posture comes in. Now, of course, you can overdo the servant posture, and if you've ever done a presentation or a sales call where someone said, "This is great information, thank you for all this, you've been really helpful," but they don't buy from you and you never hear from them again, and they ghost you and don't pay attention to you again, you probably overdid the servant posture. It's leadership, empathy, service. Now, how does this apply to a book? Well, you can't talk as a leader and be empathetic and be in the service posture at the same time. You have to know when to embody each one in the way you communicate with the person, not only in your book, but from stage, from a webinar, on a one-on-one sales call. You have to understand how to listen to the understand your audience well enough to where you know how to adapt and where to move at which stage of your entire persuasion process, because that's what a book is. It's a process of taking someone from being a complete stranger who's never heard of you before to someone who sees you as an authority that can solve their unique problem, that they can trust to do it, and they're willing to pay to do it. And that does not happen overnight, right? If it did, you wouldn't have to write a book. All you have to write is a note card that had a couple things on it. It's a step-by-step process where you hope that every time the person turns a page, reads the next chapter, that they're slowly being sold on you as an authority who understands them and who is actually going to have the heart of a teacher. And that's where the fourth posture comes in, and that's listening. And this one is where most people are lost, because if you don't know what to say in the beginning of your book, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, it's either because you don't understand this process, which is perfectly fine. It's taken me decades to figure this out and to build a system around it. But you also may not know your target audience as well as you think you do. And this is what I call the expert gap. This is where you've spent so many years peeling back all the layers of understanding about your area of expertise that picture it like you've spent all these years climbing a mountain, learning through trial and error, and you're at the top here. But if it took you that long and it took you that much work and it took you that much un, unlearning what you knew before and learning new things, do you really think you can come right out and start talking about your expertise in that language to somebody who's at the bottom of the mountain, or who's at the bottom of the mountain and all the way across the valley and has to walk all the way across the valley to get there, or who's way out in the woods and can't even see the mountain where they are? Now, I'll tell you what that metaphor means in just a second, but are you starting to see how the way you show up in your book is going to make all the difference between whether you enjoy these four benefits or not? And if you're in the process, look, if you're writing a book right now and you're thinking, "Seth, this makes so much sense, I want to make sure I get this right," get in touch with me on social media. Okay. You can Google my name, find me on Facebook or find me on Instagram, send me a message, tell me about your project, and let's talk. I do have one opening right now. I've already got someone asking about it, so it's going to fill up really quick. But if you've already written a book and you're saying, "Yeah, Seth, all those benefits that you're talking about, my book's not giving me those benefits," you probably need a second edition of that book that actually does the things I'm talking about. Okay. So it's embodying these four postures: leadership, empathy, service, and listening. Now, listening is not obviously something you can do while you're writing your book. You have to come to me or the person who's helping you write your book with knowledge of your target market, how they think about their problem, right? And that's the next thing I'm going to talk about before we wrap up today. But I hope this is making sense to people. It's not about writing a book. Being an author and being an authority are two totally different things. And I call it the authority gap. You write a book, you put it out there, and it doesn't have the impact you want. You're like, book writing doesn't make sense. Doesn't work anymore. Everyone has a book now. AI, baloney. None of those things are true. It's all about the way that you showed up in the book, right? And some of you are thinking, "Wow, this is really depressing. I already wrote a book and I made these mistakes." That's actually a good thing if you're thinking that, because it means that you know it's time to pivot. It's time to create a second version of that book, a revision of that book that actually does the things we're talking about. So now you're probably thinking, "Well, Seth, how do I know when to speak to them as a leader? How do I know when to embody authority? How do I know when to embody empathy? How do I know when to embody service?" It sounds really complicated. Here's the first thing you got to understand. And this is the framework that everything else that I teach fits into. If you can get what I'm about to tell you, everything in your life is going to change in terms of how you communicate with people, not only in your books, but in your sales calls, your webinars, your sales funnels, everything that you write, everything you say, how you listen to people, how people respond to you. This is going to change everything. Knowing when to embody what posture, knowing what to say at what time, when to introduce your story, when to introduce your expertise, when to introduce your credentials, when to share your client success stories, when to educate them, when to direct them, when to relate with them as an empathetic peer, all comes down to one thing, and that's understanding their stage of awareness about the problem that you solve for them or the outcome you deliver. I'll say that again. It's understanding where they are in their stage of awareness about the problem you solve or the outcome you deliver. See, people do not buy products, services, and ideas. They buy solutions to problems, and they buy the outcome that problem, that once that problem goes away, if they can achieve that outcome, they're buying the outcome. If they could get the problem solved and get the outcome that the problem is kind of an obstacle to without hiring you, without paying you, without buying your product, if they could just snap their fingers and a genie would give them that outcome and would wipe the problem out, believe me, they would do it. And I don't blame them. So a lot of people will think, well, the problem that I solve is I help people to like find a house. That's not the problem you solve. Or the problem that I solve is I help people to get insurance. That's not the problem you solve, right? I want to challenge everybody on here. If you want to apply what I'm talking about here, is ask yourself, what problem does my idea, my product, or my service solve for people? And here's the catch. See if you can answer this question without mentioning your service or your product specifically. Because what people will say, well, it helps them find a personal trainer. You did it wrong, right? If you're mentioning your product or your service, your product or service category, you're not understanding the problem that your product or service solves. And I'll tell you why this is so crucial in just a second. But they're buying a solution to a problem. So what I want you to do, and I have a GPT that I've designed that does this for my coaching students, is define the problem that your product or service solves without actually mentioning your product or service. Like if a person wants to move to another house, they want to buy a new house, you might think if you're a realtor, well, I help them find a new house. No, you don't. You help them solve the problem of their house being overcrowded and they need to upgrade. Like, right, their family is outgrowing their house. And if you want to peel back one layer from there, what are all the things that happen to a family when their family starts outgrowing their house? They have clutter everywhere. They feel stressed out because everywhere they look at, there's boxes. Their kids are fighting because they're living in the same room together. That's the problem you're solving. It has nothing to do with the house, right? So this is what you got to understand. And here's why this is important. Because knowing what posture to embody, what to say first, what to say second, all comes from understanding their state of awareness about the problem. Here's what I mean by that. There are 4 stages of awareness that a person goes to as they go from being someone who's never heard of you before and isn't even thinking about a service like yours to someone who has bought from you and paid you a lot of money. There's 4 stages they're going to go through. The first stage is where they start to experience the symptoms of the problem, but they can't name the problem. They don't see the connection between those symptoms and the problem itself. Maybe they're getting arthritis pain in their feet. They don't know that their gut health is jacked up. They just know they have arthritis pain in their feet. Maybe their kids are fighting because they don't have enough room, but they're not thinking, I need to get a new house. They're just thinking, why do my kids keep fighting? Why do I have this clutter all over the house? I need to hire an organizer. I need to get a bigger garage. They're aware of the symptoms of the problem, but they aren't specifically naming the problem and saying, here's the thing we need to do, right? If most of the people who you help are at that stage, what do you think is going to happen if you go right out talking about your solution, talking about your framework, talking about your expertise? They are not going to listen, right? Because they're going to be like, why is this relevant to me? How is it going to help solve this? The first thing you've got to do with a person at that stage of awareness is open your book or your chapter or your introduction or your video or your webinar or your stage speech by describing the symptoms of the problem in a language they recognize as their everyday internal conversation or conversations with other people as they're talking about it. That's it. It's called joining the conversation happening in their head. Now, why is this important? Because if they hear your message and it comes close or nails a conversation they have in their head every day, in their mind every day, or when they talk to people, they're going to feel understood. They're going to feel like, wow, this person's really reading my mail. Imagine if someone came up to you on the streets and you were having a certain problem, maybe in your marriage and your business, and they started asking you questions that said like, hey, are you having a really hard time like finding high paying clients? And you've never met this person before, but the questions they're asking demonstrate that they understand like the internal dialogue that's been keeping you up at night, because it sounds exactly like the way you talk to yourself. Are you going to keep listening to them? Of course you are. You might think they're a little weird, but they've got your attention. That's the first thing you need to do when you're talking to somebody in your book. And the problem is most people go right out of the gate and say, I've got the such and such framework. It's done this and this for this person. The person goes, what the hell does this have to do with what I'm experiencing right now? That's if they're at stage one. Now, the best way to write a book is to treat everybody like they're at that stage. Okay. Because no matter what, the person you're talking to is experiencing the symptoms. They want to feel heard. They want to feel understood. They're going to respond to you. But there's another stage that people could be at, and that's where they've identified the problem. They know the problem by name, and they're actively looking for a way to solve it. But they're not sold on the type of service that you offer. Maybe they're thinking about doing it themselves. Maybe there's somebody else out there who solves the same problem with a different type of solution than you do. This is stage three. This is people who are shopping not between you and competitors, but between a variety of different solutions. Now, they may even have a misconception, or they may have a negative frame or assumption about your type of product or service that you have to bring down before you can even talk about your type of product or service. And so you don't come right out of the gate talking about how you're the best functional health doctor, or you're the best acupuncturist, or you're the best business coach, or you're the best expert for doing Facebook cold ads, if they have some bias against that, or if they're biased towards some other solution that they think solves the same problem. That's stage two. They're curious about ways to solve the problem. They know the problem by name, but they don't fully understand why the type of solution you offer is ideal. So again, if your book comes right out talking about how you're the top person for your type of service in your category, the only people you're going to appeal, you're going to completely alienate those first two type of people. Stage one and stage two, they're not going to feel understood. They're going to feel like you're just trying to sell something. They're going to put your book down, right? Stage three is where most experts talk to people. And that's where the person's looking for a product or service like the one that you offer within the category of you and your other competitors. And they're just looking for the best person. But it is a mistake to write a book for that target audience because it's too cluttered and oversaturated. By the time a person gets to the point where they're looking for a product or service like yours, it's probably too late for you to get on their radar. They've probably got a referral. They've got someone they've been watching on YouTube. Someone else has already been in their mind for a lot longer than you have, and you probably don't stand a chance of getting hired. And if they do consider hiring you, they're probably going to price shop you against the other person who they're more familiar with. And this is the biggest mistake people make in marketing, is they only know how to talk to stage three buyers, people who are specifically looking for your type of service. They're looking for a business coach to help with their marketing. They're looking for a copywriter. They're looking for an acupuncturist. And you're like, I'm an acupuncturist too. I'm an acupuncturist too. But by that time, they're already familiar with somebody else. Someone else has already positioned themselves as an authority, and it's too late for you to come in and be the authority who actually has sold them already on your ideology, brought down price resistance with a coherent message that's the same across all communication channels, because you're too late. You're too late to the party. And this is probably why you're struggling with your marketing right now, is you only know how to market to those people. Now, stage four is, you wouldn't write a book for this stage, but it's important for you to understand this. These are people who already know who you are and who have decided that at some point in the future they're going to buy from you, but they're procrastinating about it. That's stage four, right? They're just waiting for you to make the irresistible offer, or overcome that last minute objection, or make it really easy for them to get started. 4 stages of awareness. Stage one, they're aware of the symptoms, but not the problem, but they want it. They want to be free of the symptoms. Stage two, they're aware of the problem by name, but they're not open to your type of product or service. They're looking at a bunch of different options, or maybe even thinking they can solve the problem themselves. That's stage two. Stage three, they're looking for a service provider within your category, but now you got to compete against all your other competitors. That's stage three. Stage four, they're sold on you, but they haven't said yes yet. Now, here's what your book needs to do. Your book needs to start with everybody talking to them like they're a stage one person, and it knows how to systematically, step by step, page by page, sentence by sentence, idea by idea, to slowly massage in the message of why their problem is relevant to them, it's critical, it's urgent. Now they become a stage two person by about chapter 3 of your book. Stage two, then you start knocking down and debunking all the alternatives options and talking about why those aren't the best thing. You sell them on the category that you belong to by saying, here's why it's dangerous to do it yourself. Here's why it's dangerous to hire this type of person. Here's why it's dangerous to do it this way, or why it's slow to do it this way, or it's more expensive. And by the time they get to about chapter 5 or 6, that's when you start doing what most people make the mistake of doing in the introduction to their book. And that's where you start to actually position yourself as a unique expert within your category. And then by the end of the book, they're sold on you. And then stage 4 is getting an offer at the end of the book that gets them to say yes and to come to you right away. Are you starting to see the problem here? Knowing when to embody the leadership posture, the empathy posture, the service posture, all depends on which stage of awareness you have moved that person through. And your book needs to be a journey from stage 1 all the way to stage 4, right? That's it. That is how you turn a person who is a complete stranger into someone who's willing to come to you and pay you premium prices with no resistance towards taking your advice, who's going to bring you referrals, who's going to build you the type of business you want. Now, there's either two. We're going to wrap up in a second here, but I hope this is making sense to people. Now, there's either three type of people listening to this. Some of you are just curious and like to listen to me talk. I love you guys. I don't. It's fascinating to hear that people just like to listen to my stuff, but aren't actually going to apply any of it. They just think that I'm interesting the way that I talk. I hear from those people all the time. It's good to have you here. I'm very glad you're here. Tell some more people about me. There's a second person who is probably in the process of writing a book right now and just feels stuck and doesn't know how to organize things sequentially. What do I say first? What do I say second? What do I say in chapter 1? I've developed a formula based on everything I just taught you that works very, very well for making sure that your idea gets into the person's mind in such a way to where by the time they've read your entire book, they have no price resistance, no ideological resistance. They're ready to come to you to work with you. And it may take 3 years. Maybe they read your book and then they start listening to your stuff on YouTube or on Instagram, and you're saying the same thing you are in your book. And they're like, okay, I'm getting it. I'm getting it. The light bulbs are starting to go off, and finally they come to you. But it needs to move people step by step through this process. Can you write a book that's really successful without doing all this? Sure, plenty of people have done it, but usually they have an advantage that you don't have. They have a big following already. They have a strong social network. They got a strong connection. Maybe they got an expert to write a foreword for their book, which I can tell you how to do. I've done that twice now. But the best chance that you have of writing and publishing a book that presents you as an authority that can sell when you're absent, bring down price resistance, bring down ideological resistance, make your message coherent across all communication channels, and actually reward you with the type of lifestyle that you really want. If you want the best chance possible of doing that, this is the process that I've tested hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books that I've written, not only books, sales funnels, campaigns, webinars, presentations. This messaging strategy works across any type of communication channel. I have made people's webinars more effective. I've made people's sales funnels more effective, their web copy, their email marketing, because it's all the same thing. It's all the same progression from a person who doesn't really understand their problem to a person who's completely sold on your offer and ready to say yes. And there's nobody else in the world that I know of who has developed a framework and actually tested it in real world situations across multiple industries, multiple businesses, multiple communication channels as rigorously as I have. And mine is based on the science of formal axiology, which is a whole other thing I could get into. But if you're writing a book right now and you're Seth, I want to make sure I do this right and I'm ready to hire someone who can really help, get in touch with me on social media. Just send me a message. I'm not going to send you to like a weird application page or one like that. I want to have a conversation with you and see if this is a good fit. All right. That's the first thing you can do. If you've already written a book and it hasn't had the effect that you want, I can also help you with that. There's a couple different things we may have to do depending on how your book is landing. But the bottom line is this: being an author will not make you an authority unless you write your book in such a way to where when the person first starts reading it, they feel like you understand them. They feel like their problem is more critical and urgent than they realize. You give them an insight that literally changes the way they think about the problem. And then you start to introduce why all the other solutions that they've probably tried haven't worked. That builds up their sense of confidence that if they try something that actually is going to work, that it'll work. And all those years of work and money invested and energy invested and hope are finally going to pay off once they come to you. And that's when you start talking about your expertise, usually around chapter 5. I hope you can see the mistake most people make because they try to go right to the chapter 5 content in chapter 1 and they wonder why the hell no one's reading their book. That's why. Okay. So those are your options. I do hope to hear from some of you. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, I don't know if I'm ready to write a book, but my God, I'd like to apply this messaging psychology in whatever I'm doing. I do have a group coaching program. You do have to apply for it. I don't accept everybody into it. But again, contact me on social media. Let's have a real conversation. I'm not going to send you through a marketing funnel. I want to know how I can help you. Get in contact with me. Tell me what you got out of this message. And do me a favor. If you're listening on YouTube or on Facebook or on LinkedIn, give this a like and put a comment below and just share it with somebody else who might be interested in hearing this message and benefit from it. Until then, I will see you next time. Thanks everybody for listening. Bye bye now.